first off, I want to say thank you for your service for giving us the shirtless scenes during this episode. So thank you for that.
Very nice of you. How are you, Laura?
Good, good. It's so great chatting with you and seeing you again, and
Yeah.
also I watching you perform these 6 episodes were so great and so detailed because my background is science journalism, so it's actually great to watch you my worlds collide together as you playing a microbiologist. So it's really
Nice.
great to see that.
And
But you
how's the
know,
little one?
he's good. He's good. You know, he. I always tell him, Daniel Dae Kim, you were blessed by him. You need to.
So funny.
Anytime he's behaving badly, I'm like, Daniel Dae Kim would not approve.
That's hilarious. What can I answer for you today?
Yeah, but I am excited because Agent Riker is a fictional character developed for the story. But who did you use as a guide to portray this microbiologist FBI agent?
All right, on their line.
What do we know?
Passenger list is already in. Names of interest are being looked into, but we're still waiting on the cargo manifest.
Now, these guys wouldn't have any check luggage. Anything they need, they would already had on them. Still, we can't rule out the potential of a bioagent. These planes could have been used as a method of dispersal. Pick the highest point in the city, let gravity do the rest. Get the hazmat units mobilized. I'll start running it up the chain.
Because he was an amalgamation, there wasn't anyone specific, but I found that really freeing in that I could really put together the character from scratch. And so I actually interviewed a number of FBI agents in preparation for the role, and a couple of them were Asian American. And so I was able to get their perspective on what it was like looking like me and being in an organization like that was overwhelmingly white and male. And, you mentioned science before. The agents in the FBI are type A. They're very aggressive. They're very determined. They're very ambitious. And so, for someone who comes in with a science background, who is part of a minority group, it was about the battle. It was very easy to lock into a character that felt like an outsider and needed to and had the same kind of drive and ambition as every other agent, and was tasked with this investigation that was almost impossible based on what the circumstances were and what the job required. I mean, if you watch the whole series, like there's that sequence where they go through every single letter that came through a post office, and you think about the kind of determination and persistence that requires. That's kind of a superpower.
Yeah. Well, with the science behind it, because we know that anthrax is a biological weapon, and you can't help but compare and parallel the mass hysteria of what's going on now with COVID. While working on the set, did you think more about the pandemic and how it's connected all with the atmosphere of what's going on in the world, and also what you're portraying from history?
Yeah, not only did I think about it, I was experiencing it because we were shooting in Canada in the middle of a COVID lockdown. And so, I was getting tested every other day. I was, isolated from all of my castmates. There were no restaurants to go to, no retail. So it was the entirety of the shooting. And so, it really drew into stark relief the parallels between that time and the time we're living through right now, and also the ways that we came together in both of those times and then split apart and became more polarized. All of these kind of events parallel one another in that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. With the story, there's so much story behind regarding the agent. Do you feel like your portrayal as a character, because you did a lot of research regarding 2001 was so different from now, when your character, do you feel like you were able with 2001, he's the only Asian American character there in a world full of white agents, basically. How did you use that to kind of create the background of pushing the story narrative further for your character?
Well, again, it was about him having to prove himself, and what would it take for someone to go to the lengths that he went to solve this case, to try and solve this case. And so I have to find reasons for his drive. One is his background in science. One is the fact that he's just a driven individual. Another is that he's an outsider that feels like he has something else to prove because of his ethnicity. And also, his deep love for his adopted parents. His father was he served the country in Vietnam, and so he has a direct family link to service and patriotism.
Well, thank you so much. It was so lovely talking to you again and seeing you again. I always love talking to you and telling my son about you.
Well, it's always great to talk to you too, Laura. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Good talking to you. Thank you. Okay, so you did such a wonderful job in this, and regarding the mental health, the deterioration of Bruce Ivan's story, which has been debated for so long, with the DOJ saying he's the person who did it, but scientists are saying that it's impossible. So how do you make sure you portray this man's story and psyche based on the intel that you do have?
Well, thanks for saying that. I just did as much research as I could into Bruce and his story. There's a very interesting biography written about him called Mirage Man by an LA Times reporter who was really tracking this investigation. And that had, just has a wealth of information about Bruce's childhood, his relationship with his mother, which was deeply traumatic, and kind of the odyssey of his life, that, much of which is dramatized in this project.
Things are good. Lately with Diane and the kids, everything's clicking. I mean, the only stressful thing is...
And how has work been lately?
And other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Do you want to expand on that?
Stressful.
And then it also, which I sourced out on several other books, really gets into the details of the scientific investigation, because, the FBI pointed fingers at they went on some wrong roads even before they focused it all on Bruce. Stephen Hadfield's life was ruined by the FBI. He was totally innocent, but they get their man, but also as the science evolved over the 7-year investigation, the use of DNA evidence developed such that they could identify the DNA of the actual strain that was in the envelopes. And that was really, to me, the most damning thing. Bruce, has no one knows for sure, and there are many different opinions about this, but that one to me was very persuasive, and I think that the truth is Bruce Ivan struggled terribly with mental illness, but that is not a crime. So I just have tremendous, whatever his behavior was, I have tremendous compassion for the suffering that he endured as a human being. And I feel like if there wasn't such a stigma on, mental health, and certainly in the 1990s and early 2000s, hopefully it's better now. We still have a long way to go, but I think if there was not the stigma on, mental illness, he would not have struggled in the way that he did, later in his life.
Yeah, well, no, definitely. With, the portrayal that you gave him a lot of sympathy, and a lot of throughout his whole story. And for me, regarding the science behind the character, there's a lot of parallel of what's going on with the biological weapon and what's going on with COVID today. Mass hysteria is going on, and this was filmed during the pandemic. So did working on this and working as the character, dealing with Anthrax and the history, and reflecting back on the Anthrax scare, did it make you think more about the pandemic and what was going on outside filming?
Gosh, yeah, it was unavoidable. I mean, we shot this in the midst of the pandemic. We were in Toronto, and the city was completely under lockdown because there had been a surge in December, and we were filming from February to June. So everything was closed. We, very strict protocols of working on a film and television set. So everyone was masked with shields and tested 3 times a week. And you know, you have a whole COVID team that's making sure everyone's in compliance all the time. And it was a lot, you know, it's very onerous, as everybody knows. You know, we were grateful to be working and to be able to do our thing. And then to be telling a story, you know, about a biological attack, or, you know, it really, again, we were filming before vaccines were in you know, wide supply. So we all felt very vulnerable and very confused and very uncertain. And there was all this misinformation circulating around about everything. And, you know, a lot of discord, obviously, in our public discourse about it, and skepticism about science and political agendas being, you know, pushed forward, all of which were happening during the Anthrax investigation and our lead up, especially in our lead up to the invasion of Iraq, because, you know, when it was suspected that Saddam Hussein might be connected and that there might be an element, a substance in the anthrax powder that was connected to a substance that was in the anthrax that Saddam used against his own people, it was like, that's it. Let's use this as justification to go to war in Iraq. And they did, and they were wrong. You know, that it was not the same. So there are a lot of discomforting parallels to what we're living through today. But you know, I think people really relate to just the feeling of this invisible enemy being out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for answering and being so great with the answers, and being so great in on the series.
Thank you so much. It's great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you. I'm so excited to chat with you. I've been a huge fan of yours forever. So I wanted to tell you that, you know, you were amazing as Tom Brokaw. Clearly, there are some points I couldn't distinguish Harry from Tom. Like, I closed my eyes and I felt like I was watching Tom Brokaw again.
This soon after 9/11? Seems early to rule out terrorism. All right, they specifically mention an inhalation case. What other forms of infection are there? And symptoms beyond those that mimic the flu? I need odds of recovery, history of outbreaks, everything you can get me, especially if it involves Al-Qaeda.
Yes, Mr. Brokaw.
So, and you know, Tom Brokaw is extremely professional and unbiased in his work due to the nature of the story and how close it was to him. Like, but you know, it affected him greatly. How did you prepare to portray this iconic journalist during this pressing time?
When I was first offered the chance to do it, I wasn't at all sure it would be a good thing to do. I have a kind of hubris that somehow I take on projects that are impossible, and this one is definite. It was impossible to play Tom Brokaw. Really, you can't. Yeah, but I think I was intrigued by the challenge of doing it, and I remember saying to my representatives, you know, I feel like I'm walking a tightrope doing this without a net underneath me, and at any moment, you know, things could go terribly wrong. But I decided to do it, and when I, you know, made that decision, I jumped in feet first, and I was able to, you know, there's a lot of material on Tom Brokaw, and he wrote a lot of books, and he has done all the audio versions himself. So I was able to listen to those books, and by listening to them, I was able to get a feeling for who the man was, not just as a broadcaster, but also as a human being, because you get a sense of his temperament, you get a sense of how he views the world from the books that he's written, not from his newscasts. So that was, you know, there's a lot of very rich material that I could go into there. And then, of course, you know, I watched Anthony Hopkins do Nixon, because I wanted to so Hopkins takes on this extraordinarily iconic figure of a president of the United States, and how did he do it? And I remember seeing the movie and going, wow, you know, Hopkins really nailed Nixon, though he didn't try to imitate Nixon. You know, he wasn't doing an impression of Nixon. He was just kind of getting the flavor of Nixon and trying to get the cadence of his voice, how he held his head, you know, different things like that. So I attacked it like that. I used Anthony Hopkins' Nixon as a kind of an analog for how I was going to hit Brokaw.
Oh wow, it was perfect. You hit it all the points, because I watched the Anthrax during when it was happening, and it just brought me back while listening to you. But you know, the story is about a biological weapon, and you can't help but compare what's going on with today with the hysteria of COVID. You know, with the atmosphere, like working on a film like this, did it make you think more about the pandemic and what was going on while filming a film about a biological weapon and dealing with a worldwide pandemic?
Well, there's a certain meta quality to this because we are in a pandemic. The first one that was done about Ebola, and they finished it, and all of a sudden, we had a pandemic, and that so I'm sure that there were some conversations about what to do, whether to air it or not air it, or when to air it, or how to. And so the same thing is going on with this one because even though it is not talking about a pandemic, it is talking about a biological weapon that, and a biological weapon that, could spread around and could definitely, I mean, I remember that there were people saying, I might have been Rumsfeld, said people should go out and get duct tape and duct tape your windows in case somebody comes along with a crop duster and dusts your home with anthrax. I mean, people were going that far in terms of scaring us. And I remember going out and buying a bunch of duct tape too. My kids were very young at the time, babies. And so I was like, I got to protect my kids. I can't let this anthrax come through the windows, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it was a very interesting time.
Well, portraying a journalist and what journalists are going through regarding the news and resources and the sources that we always have to be efficient in our news sources. Playing a journalist, did it give you appreciation of what was going on with the news resources coming out, especially during Anthrax and also during what's going on with COVID?
Well, I mean, it was 9/11 had happened. So the news was almost completely focused on 9/11. And then this came along and the news cycle grabbed this, but 9/11 was always on top of this story. I mean, and certainly all of us felt that this had to be an extension of what had happened on 9/11 and was actually terrorism that was sort of coming from abroad. Comparing it to what's going on with the pandemic, I see that, the top news story almost always on every news broadcast has to do in some way with the pandemic or the vaccinations or something like that. So these kinds of stories tend to dominate news cycles. And we don't have a Tom Brokaw anymore. To be the anchor out there who kind of calms us down and lets us think that things are going to be okay. Most of the news today is pretty geared toward riling people up and making people afraid. And in the old days, we had Walter Cronkite and Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather who kind of calmed us down and made us feel like everything's going to be okay. And I wish we had that guy right now.
No, definitely. But no, I really appreciate your portrayal of Tom Brokaw. It really was amazing, and I really appreciated you portraying him in such a beautiful way. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It was so great chatting with you, and I can't wait for everyone else to see the series. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Hi, I'm so excited to talk about this series. But first of all, I want to thank you for your service for giving us Daniel Dae Kim shirtless scene. I want to thank you for that. We thank you for the Nerd of Color, so thank you for that.
Well, I would love to take credit, but I'm not. I really have nothing to do with him being shirtless. So,
but I want to focus on the series. Focuses on the 2001 Anthrax attacks and the process of what happened. Because there's so many different cases, the FBI briefings, news articles, personal stories. How did you gather all this information to ensure the story is being told authentically and in an accurate way?
We spent months and months, like a whole team of us, just doing the research. Brian and myself, and we had a great assistant and a great writers of the room assistant and script supervisor, and an amazing team of writers. We had 3 really wonderful writers on staff, and we literally dove into mountains of books and articles, anything we could get our hands on, and literally made our own book for the most part, because not one of them really had the complete story or all the pieces of the timeline. So we wrote a single-spaced 100-page book just for our own reference, so that we could make sure that we were getting everything as accurate as we possibly could.
Well,
painstaking.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of research, and my background's in science too, so I was like, oh wow,
great.
this is really interesting.
Where
And
were
you know,
you months ago when we
I
needed
know,
you?
like yeah, like I study science journalism, so I did epidemiology studies and stuff. So it's so interesting to have my two worlds collide again.
Oh, great.
But yeah, with Bruce Ivan's story, though, the DOJ believed he was the person for years, but scientists said it was impossible for him to do it. How did you make sure to adapt it in a way that leaves it open?
Well, I mean, it was important to us that we give the facts and the evidence that the FBI had, but we also have voices from the scientific community in the show that are questioning what's going on, and we really just sort of lay out what evidence there was, and have people discuss it and have people have different points of view. The story is told through the POV of one specific FBI agent, which is Matthew Riker, the amazing Dae Kim. And so we're really trying to stay true to what he believes, his character believes, which we think is a pretty fair representation of what the FBI believed at that time. But there's multiple other characters in the show, all of whom, we try to flesh out with their own thoughts and opinions.
Well, with the story being, it's a biological weapon, and you can't help but to compare and parallel the mass hysteria of it with what's currently going on. And I know you've probably gotten a lot of people comparisons, but because this was filmed during a pandemic, what was the atmosphere on set while working on this film during a mass pandemic?
Oh, it was intense. I mean, first of all, everybody has on a mask and a shield. So even though I'm maybe trying to talk with one of our great directors or, one of our amazingly talented cast members, there's all these layers. So, I mean, just even saying hello had its own list of challenges. And, there were really strict protocols that Disney came in and really sort of set up some wonderful boundaries. We had entire teams of people that were literally just there to try to keep everybody COVID safe. It was pretty surreal that we were on location. So anybody who didn't live in Toronto, we had this great crew who most of them were from Toronto, but all of the cast members and other, key crew members that came in lived in complete isolation because Toronto was shut down and we didn't live there. So we didn't have friends and family that maybe we were bubbling with. So on the weekends, everybody was literally sitting by themselves in front of the TV. Thank God for TV. It really made me feel like maybe I'm doing something important in the world by giving people entertainment, because I sure needed it during those months up there.
Thank you so much. It's such an interesting story to really reflect back on from a few years ago. So thank you so much for this. And it's so great chatting with you.
Oh, you too. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All
right. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.
Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.